My name is Charlotte Jansen and I'm an art and photography critic and journalist. So we are in the lecture theatre at the V&A South Kensington, and we have just finished a fascinating panel discussion with 4 shortlisted artists for the 2025 Prix Pictet. I've been speaking with 4 of the shortlisted artists for this year's prize: Tom Fecht, Laetitia Vançon, Marina Caneve and Takashi Arai. The theme of this year's Prix Pictet is storm. Storm underlines not only the connection of the Prix Pictet to sustainability, but it also speaks to today's extreme weather conditions accelerated by a climate crisis and climate change. And it also has literary and metaphorical interpretations. I hope that both the panel and the exhibition will enable people to better understand the crisis and conflicts and catastrophes that we're living through in this current moment, to give them new perspectives, new ideas, and hopefully to provoke action. Thank you, Marta. A warm welcome to everyone. Well done for making it up here through the maze of beautiful objects. And I want to congratulate the 4 artists we have with us today who made it through a very rigorous process. And this exhibition really is the culmination of a couple of years working towards this Prix Pictet show, having been shortlisted. There's 12 shortlisted artists in total from many, many more. And of course, you all have practices that extend beyond and much further back what we're going to look at today. So I hope to touch on a little bit of what you've been doing with your work. So I wanted to start from the theme. Each year, the Prix Pictet has a particular theme which relates back to sustainability, but offers the possibility and potential to be explored in many different ways, interpreted in many different ways. And my initial thoughts when I heard the announcement at Arles last year about storm was that's going to be a difficult one to widen out. But as you'll see when you go to the exhibition, there are in fact many different propositions and approaches to this theme. Obviously, the immediate things that storm brings up for me are extreme weather conditions accelerated by the current climate emergency. We might think of, natural phenomenon, but also storms have such a well-established literary symbolism, from Shakespeare right up to Murakami. They are symbols of transformation, of destruction, of something uncontrollable beyond us. And perhaps through the exhibition, there's a suggestion that storms could be a necessary part of our world, necessary for releasing energy, for starting afresh and anew. So I want to start by asking each of you how your project relates to this theme of storm. We can start with Laetitia, maybe. I'm looking in your direction.
Yeah, everybody hear me? It's good? Okay. So the connection between my work and the theme storm is not literal, but metaphorical, in the sense that I'm not going to show the natural phenomenon of it, but rather what it comes with or represents, like the chaos, the fear, and especially this intense tension, which signals or marks a rupture between a before and an after. And in Ukraine, and especially in Odessa, where I create this work, normal life has been swept away from one day to another, and people are living in that fear and anticipation of this unpredictable future. So in that sense, my work is situated in this liminal space between the storm and the calm, and it looks at how people navigate this tension.
Tom, how about you? How does your work relate to this theme?
In some way, it's okay. Yeah,
I'll get your works up
it's
now.
literal because these images have been taken at very high wind speeds of above 120 kilometers an hour. And particularly this image which you see behind me called Lucifer's Vortex was hanging in my studio during the COVID pandemic. And, millions died, there was my photo lab had closed. And I was basically locked in with this vortex. And it became kind of metaphoric for, that the society was keeling over. And, the detail of this image is kind of important to understand. It's a vortex photographed in the Atlantic Ocean in Brittany from a bird's perspective, and it shows a bioluminescent plankton which discharges electricity when it's exposed to molecular oxygen. And it's very difficult to capture, you need a thermo-sensitive camera to do this, but these are microscopic creatures which are endangered by the rising temperatures in our oceans. And they have an incredible beauty to them, which I feel is something worth, protecting. So that was basically the birth of the series in its metaphoric meaning. And the storm released by COVID had the same microscopic viruses which released a storm which we still haven't digested.
Marina, to talk us through your project, which kind of takes a different approach both to photography and to the idea of a storm.
Yeah, in a way, this work, it merges the researches that I was at the day I'm interested in with the topic of storm. And these researches are based on how we can construct images that deal with catastrophes, that deal with crises, political issues, or things that are painful for us to see. And I was really searching for a way to address these topics, but without showing the pain that Susan Sontag well described, for instance. I was also really interested in the essence of the documentary style, which is pretty different from making a documentary project. So I bumped into, while doing these researches, I bumped into the theory of a geologist that thought that an event happened in 1966, a big hydrogeological catastrophe, will repeat after 100 years. And I thought that was that could be a perfect pretext to explore what I was interested theoretically about. So, in a way, I think my work deals with this idea of storm and how we can address these kind of topics without being too direct and finding ways to bring the viewer inside, a labyrinth of ideas.
Thank you. And Takashi, you're also kind of thinking about the human element here in relation to storm.
Yes.
Your project.
Yeah. And to me, that storm is, as Marina said, it's coming back. So every year in Japan, we have a typhoon. So actually, this is a seasonal typhoon. So the storm is kind of annual events, and also it's pretty much connected to the animistic sense that we have in the East Asian countries. So to me, when I got this theme, storm, I thought, actually, this is my theme, because I take storm as a collective traumata, which is impossible to approach, because trauma is a vortex. If you come too close, you will be swallowed. So my approach is like, if you think about Godzilla, Godzilla film, so the origin of Godzilla was the H-bomb test held by the United States in 1954. Then it's called the Lucky Dragon 5 incident. So the director, Honda Ishiro, created this film to represent as a collective anger of the war dead, also including the victims of nuclear victims. So those who were not well treated in a post-war Japan society. So in his theory, the Godzilla is a kind of mass anger or like a collection of the traumata which has not been soothed yet. So my work represents some kind of the buried memories and then also traumata. And I try to, how can I say, make a going round around this vortex, which we cannot approach directly.
So, I mean, maybe we could get a little bit more into the details of how and where these works were actually made, because it's not necessarily clear from looking at these images that we're seeing on the screen how these photographs look in the exhibition and what they're actually comprised of. So, Takashi, could you explain what are we actually looking at? This piece, for example, is actually more of an object, less of a photograph. You go to these former nuclear sites where atomic disasters have happened in Japan, and you make daguerreotypes painstakingly over a couple of months. Could you tell us sort of how and why you do that? Because it's when hopefully people get to see the exhibition, because I mean, with your work, it's a completely different effect to see an image that you almost can't see or make out in the exhibition. We see it more clearly here in the reproduction.
Right. I can start with many directions, but I usually work with the people besides those, monumental locations and places. And then when I met one hibakusha, and the hibakusha means the nuclear victims. So she told me, actually, she's not direct victims, because actual victims were already killed in the instant moment when the atomic bomb was detonated. So it was a very striking moment to know that, okay, actually, if we have a kind of the mind map, there's an epicenter or the ground zero, which we could just approach. Then as we approach to that center, we may approach to that truth. But in the center, there's nobody, so nobody to talk. So in that sense, we are all, those who, we are all third party or third persons. So in that sense, which only we can do is to, again, to make a circle around this void of the memories. So my approach with this multi-focus daguerreotype is take lots of time to stay one place, then going around and around day by day, and force myself to observe one object, to feel what is buried in the center of those epicenters. So it's like it's a representation of the void of the memories.
And each of these is 6 by 6
yes.
centimeters, right? So they're kind of a composite, recomposing the image also together.
Right.
What is it that interests you about daguerreotype as well? Because you started to explore it quite a while ago and master this technique while you were studying biology at university.
Right. Yeah, I dropped out from the biology class. Then I started photography. Then I thought I had to study the very beginning of the technology, because I was also curious about the moment the humankind encountered the new technology. Like if you imagine that the first moment we see the mechanical image in front of us, it might be very scary. It might be very threatening because it's very sharp. It's beyond our capacity or the ability to, see actually. So I really want to re-experience this moment. And then I found it's quite useful to engage with the difficult subjects, the difficult subject which takes lots of time to understand. Then if you see that real daguerreotypes, you can find yourself, your face is on the mirror, and then it's more like an interactive medium for me. So this conversation between the viewers, the image makers, also subjects, it's entangled on the surface of the mirrors, so which is very important to me.
Yeah, and you experienced that very strongly in the installation at the exhibition here. Marina, you were talking about your sort of motivations in making your project and kind of making work that wasn't documentary, but that was sort of about documentary photography in a way. So what are we actually looking at when we're looking at your pictures? Because in a way they're not about the kind of present state, but about how we could use photography to imagine, to visualize in a way what the future might look like if we were to face certain ecological disasters or landslide, for example.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I mean, I think, I do believe that photography has this, it's strictly connected with the idea of documenting. And then you can use it as a tool to create an imaginary that brings you into an idea. And in that sense, my work, which is based in the Italian Dolomites, but could be based everywhere eventually it's really about imagining something for the future while using images from the past and understanding different, well, let's say, I've been using categories of things that I was searching in order to build something that could let us think about a possible future, let's say. And this was possible thanks to the collaboration with geologists, well, actually 2 of them, that kind of shown me different things and show me how they do look at the environment. And also an anthropologist that also gave me a different perspective, and then the local people that I've met. That also, again, gave me their personal perspective. And I was making this project, I was trying to navigate between all these different perspectives, which is something which I like a lot, personally. I must say that probably I work as an artist because I'm a curious person, and I like to interact with all these people that have different expertise. And then I try to look at things from their perspective and merge them together, which I think it's really important because, in a way, it's about a multidisciplinary way of looking at things, and also a collaborative way of constructing our gaze and expanding what we do see about things that are just banal and that are around us and we maybe gave for granted before. So it's really about building an imagery. And well, for me also, what is really important is the relationship that you can build between images. So this work was born as a book, but also then it became an exhibition, and the way of presenting it, it's also part of a work itself. It's not only about images as files, they are not files to me, they are objects that have a form and that stay like in the space in a certain way in order to push us to have an experience of the work. And I think it's really about that. Again, it's constructing our gaze in an imaginary.
And I think the installation here at the exhibition really evokes that multi-layeredness that is implied in your work, and it almost looks like a book that's been opened at a certain page, the way the images have been, different scales, you've got different types of imagery. And we're in the Dolomites, right? Could you tell us, for example, what are we looking at here in this particular image?
Yeah, actually, at a certain point, I was thinking that I wanted to portray, well, let's say that my work is really about living in a place, and it's about risk, which is something that we experience when we live in one place and not just when we pass by, like hiking, for instance. So I really wanted to point out on the houses. And I thought that I also wanted to portray the houses from the possible landslides. But actually, I ended up in realizing that this image is almost an unicum, because very often the cause is very far from the consequence. So it's kind of, it's not always that close by. And eventually it becomes more difficult to understand. So yeah, it's really about it. And also that was something about the position where I was shooting. I was shooting from above, and I was thinking that this position is like a position that have to do with the idea of control, and therefore it was really important in the series.
Well, speaking about control, I think that's interesting when it comes to your work, Tom, because you were kind of working for 10 years before you got these Luciferians from what I understand. And like all great artworks, it then eventually came about by accident. So can you tell us what it takes to use a special kind of setup to capture these images, right? And how do you know they have to be taken at a specific time of day? How do you know when and where and how to place yourself? And how did it feel when you actually had that happy accident to capture these images?
I mean, you are right. It's a lot about serendipity, to capture these things. But let me start, what she just said, the silence before the storm is sometimes more critical than the storm itself, because once you realize it, it's too late. So I'm interested, I come from a scientific background in quantum physics, and I'm interested by principle in incertitude, which governs all of nature. And I photograph basically only at night for many years now. And I try to capture things which are invisible to the naked eye. Sometimes you can see a little bit of it. So you basically have to rely on a scientific approach to capture something. I learned about the Luciferians from Celtic myths. They refer to it like fairies who amuse themselves on breaking waves by moonlight. But they actually exist. And Lucifer is basically, it's not the devil, it's the light bringer. And I became interested in it because I realized they have such an incredible beauty to them. And it's worth preserving this beauty, and light creates beauty in the end in photography. Without this, and without light, there would be no life on the planet. So there's a lot of things happening. So when you look in this microscopic world or this invisible world, you see transformations which at some point reach exactly this point of no return, which is this silent storm, just like with the COVID pandemic. So to capture these beasts, it basically, it's a question of perspective. So this we're taking, with a camera from bird's view. It's a little contraption to get like 20 meters out into the ocean. I'm not sitting there, I'm not crazy, but the camera is there. And so you don't have a vanishing point. So that gives it a kind of an abstraction because all the movements are parallel to the camera plane. And secondly, you need a thermically sensitive memory to register this. And then you basically have to work like a blind photographer because you can't see. So you have to listen when a maximum of oxygen is agitating the waves. So that's when they break, and that's when you open the shutter. So, but you see, it's also, this happens at night, so you can't, completely abstract from these working conditions where you have a great plan, but the moment you open the shutter, you have to forget about all this. You just have to photograph from right here. You see, it's one thing to penetrate the night, to penetrate what is invisible to the naked eye, but it's very different to be penetrated by the night as an experience which is older and much greater than us. Okay, so it's kind of this astonishment towards this incredible creation. And this is what really motivates me most. But there's also a very important point included in the position of my studio in Brittany, which has no light pollution. I'm surrounded on three sides by the ocean. And when you look at the globe, 70% of the globe is water. And we call it the planet Earth, but it should be called water. It's just the other way around. And water, since the 50s, there was Rachel Carson, she wrote this incredible book, The Ocean Around Us, which was the beginning of what you call today the blue humanities, which was this paradigmatic shift from land to sea, not to look the sea as a dumb place or as a surface we can colonialize and exploit, but as a partner, because it seems that the ocean, especially where the unlimited horizon is in front of us, invites us to think about us. It's like the primary part of nature where we think about us. So it's like what Aristotle has called the pharmakon. So it's poison and anti-poison, antidote at the same time. You're attracted to it, it's violent, it's the incarnation of uncertainty, When there's no model in physics which could ever reproduce a wave. Every wave is never one wave is the same as the other. So it's also expression of compute liberty in many ways. So this shift from land to sea, I think that's paradigmatic for our time, and to understand that this water is not, we are the little thing in there and not the other way around. It has the same effect today as the moon landing head of the Apollo mission. All of a sudden we saw the blue planet from outside, and there was no alternative, and there still isn't.
Yeah, I think that there's that equal sense of kind of menace, threat, and awe when you encounter your works, and they're printed as well by yourself using a very special process and at great scale. So scale is very important, right, in making these prints, because in relation to sort of the human figure, for exactly the reasons you were saying. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, about the scale of your works?
I love inversion. So, it's. I only do unique prints. I don't only one print, just not to repeat myself, basically. But there's only one size which is good for the print. There's not like 2 or 3 different sizes. And in this case of the vortex, you need to be inside. It needs to be around you. So when you do it like as a little marine miniature, it just doesn't do the job. But it's also important that you don't see your reflection. So there's a lot of, technical detail too, that you really can perceive it. And what was in particular interesting for me when you look at this image, which has, a very painterly aspect. And these images gave me the chance to basically, cross over from photography into painting, if you like. And at the same time, I dedicated this particular image to Dylan Thomas. He made this, incredible line, "Rage, rage against the dying of the light," which was a poem he wrote in '43 in Florence for his dying father. And we heard about it again in Oliver Nolan's Interstellar film. And I think this, a landscape, to call a landscape rage is kind of very conventional and dusty, it sounds, but there is this metaphoric background also playing in this, and all this plays together in trying to do something where the image can speak for itself.
Yeah, I love that relationship in your work between this kind of hubristic idea of humans, in the history of landscape painting in particular. Laetitia, I mean, this prize is also very much about considering the kind of role of photographers and photography, and also pushing the idea of what types of photography there are, how they might be used, how we might innovate within certain kind of traditional forms. And I feel like you are doing that with the documentary or even sort of war photography genre. And you work as a visual storyteller, published by National Geographic, Time magazine, New Yorker, and this particular work in the Ukraine was a commission or an assignment for the New York Times, right? What was the assignment, and how did you approach this work? Speaking about, in the way Tom's was also mentioning about sort of ways we might work with nature. How does that apply also here in terms of working with the communities who are living? This was 100 days into the war.
Yeah, that's correct. So actually, it's 100 days. So it's in June 2022. It's called Tribute to Odessa because it's mainly in Odessa, pictured. And it started in June, but it began really when the full-scale invasion started in February. When I went already on assignment to document the refugee crisis in the Moldovan border. And there I was hearing and recording mainly stories from southern Ukrainian side, so Mariupol, Kherson, Mykolaiv, Odessa. And what struck me at this moment was this gulf or gap of realities where I was located and hearing these stories from hell, obviously, and this geographically so close of each other, like a few kilometers is Odessa already, but for myself, impossible to mentally reconcile. And this creates these sparks, this call to want to witness and to record, which I think is an historical moment. So for security reason, I couldn't go back then. That's why only in June I entered Odessa. And I took the exactly same way, basically, of the refugee I was documenting before, but the other way around. And when I arrived with, in my head, all this idea, all these images, sorry, that was present in the media. There was Mariupol, completely destroyed in the hand of Russia, Kramatorsk station attacks, killing hundreds of civilians and injuring even more, and the Bucha massacre surfacing. So it was very graphic in all the media, and that was our perception of the war back then. But when I arrived in Odessa, I arrived with the spring, and the city was blooming. And what I see, even if the war was everywhere, in the air, in the sea, and the land, I see life coming back. I see this urge to try to get back a sense of normality, doesn't matter what. And so I decided to turn my lens not toward destruction, but rather towards this life coming back. And to do so, I also wanted to show the complexity, therefore, of the narrative of the war. And so I layer this normal life, this daily scene, with trace or scars of the war, like these sandbags on the forefront with the student dancing on the background. I hope that helps to show this complexity, these layers of difficulties and challenges a population is experiencing.
And it makes me think, and we were speaking about this between us before, the role of beauty in creating images of conflict, of crisis, in challenging conditions. I'd be really interested to know for each of you what role that plays. Why beauty might be a problem, why beauty or aesthetics might be important, how you each kind of consider them when you're making your work. Maybe Laetitia could, I know this is important for you.
This is a really important question, and it's complicated as well. I mean, in beauty there is this notion of aesthetic, I will say. And I think you can aestheticize without beautifying. This is very different things. In my work, the aesthetic quality will sit in the light, in a composition, in the colors, but at no time there is a denial of the reality. So I can do a compelling image without making it prettier. And for me, it plays a role as an entry door, entry point for the viewer to come in. It's an invitation to pause, to look, to, I believe without an aesthetic engagement, probably the gaze slips away. Slips away, sorry. So for me, it's almost, it's not like a trap, but it's possible that maybe the form allow the meaning to land. Yeah. I don't know how is it for you, but.
Yeah, I mean, for example, this one has that kind of, very painterly Renaissance kind of light. What are we looking at in this image, and how did that
This is like ladies assisting at a mass in an Orthodox church. So the Orthodox church are very pretty, and it's full of, the whole wall are paints, and there is paint all around the walls. I decided to include it into the series because I was also searching for the extraordinary into the ordinary, and that's part of it in my sense that is a small victory, because the Orthodox Church separate from the Patriarch of Moscow, and at the time, exactly at the time I was there, And so that was a possibility to get rid of this Russian narrative inside the religion and the society of Ukraine.
But your images are not staged generally
No,
or
no, no.
directed.
No,
These come about like with Tom's by a sort of accident.
Yeah, it's unfolding in front of my lens. So I basically, this is like a project which goes over now 3 years. I go back and forth in Ukraine, and each time I go back to Odessa, I had a piece to this series. Yeah, it's not staged.
What about for the rest of you? What kind of role does beauty play in your work? I know, Tom, you had some thoughts about that, and you mentioned about it earlier. And it was interesting that all of you have backgrounds in other disciplines. So Tom, Laetitia, and Takashi all in science and architecture for you, Marina. And yet your works all come from this fundamentally emotional place. That's the kind of your real starting point, I guess. And you talked about that kind of not thinking and letting go when you're being in the moment. How does that then sort of evolve into an image and into a beautiful image? How comfortably does that sit with you? This idea of beauty.
Well, see, when you come from science, what you see in microscopes and on negatives of scientific imaging, I was always attracted by this beauty. And in quantum physics in particular, you have this, this law of uncertainty, where you never know, what charge, at what location, at what speed. And, I think life is now 5 years after COVID very much like this. So incertitude is kind of my general subject, and unexpectedly it turned into a reality now. So it turns lives of millions of people on the global scale upside down. And I think we need beauty to meet this mental, intellectual challenge. It's like flowers, you can say, well, bread is important, and I think flowers are equally important. To put it in a simple phrase. Photography, I think, has this potential that you can, that it can see, the eye sees so much more than words can ever express. And photography today can exploit this difference, this surplus. And it's a very personal thing. You can't do this without empathy. You can't do it without a philosophical background, a camera standpoint or a personal standpoint. This is all kind of conditional. And when you see what happens in nature and how incredibly creative evolution is, you at the end you can't help but you have to stay modest. I think that's a very important part of being able to express beauty, is to simply shut up about oneself.
We're going to move soon to questions, but I wanted to kind of end on asking each of you what you think the role of photography is in today's world in kind of confronting, in particular, crisis, catastrophe, conflict. Takashi, what's your thoughts?
Right. Yes, current situation, speaking of Gaza, it's no single photographic image stopped the genocide. So this is a severe fact. And then also I'm trying to connect the former question about beauty. And then I think I completely agree with Laetitia. It is an entry point for our zone of the interests. So for myself, I started the series representing here. It's called Exposed in 100 Suns. So I took this title from the American photographer Michael Light. So he curated the photos of the nuclear tests. Then I encountered this book 2008. So then I thought, oh, this is very beautiful. It's all mushroom clouds and all blasts and the strange colors of the skies. It looks all the sense of the sublime. Then I was instantly shocked because, okay, this is a nuclear test. So it is the same energy that released on above the sky in Hiroshima, Nagasaki. So it was actually a very much shocking moment for me. But then I really started thinking, so in photography, what is missing? So that was my question started. Then maybe this is something missing is the sense of being exposed to the event, so which is very challenging to deliver through the photographic image. So I wanted to put my title "Exposed" in the understands. So we call nuclear victims as hibakusha. Hibaku means like exposed to the blast or exposed to the radiation. So the word itself contains the sense of being exposed. So through your body. So I think if we can successfully deliver the sense of our body sensation through the photographic image, maybe we can change our mindsets or our way of observing the realities, not through the window or the safe window to the realistic world. So yeah, which is my challenge, and then I have no answer yet, but keep trying. So.
Thank you, Marina. What do you feel about this question?
Yeah, of course, that's a huge question. Well, I've been thinking while you were asking about this beautiful book, Sentir le grisou, which is a book by a French philosopher, Georges Didier Huberman, that at certain point says something that sounds like we should expect that thinkers, history, and people working with the arts will warn us about the upcoming catastrophes. So I think, in a way, the role of photography, but as any other language in the arts, is just to point out things that are happening around us. We are like individuals that live inside a world and inside a society, and where things happen, and we should confront with these things that are happening. So in a way, I do believe that the role of our work is always political, it's always critical, but in a way, I'm also fascinated by an imagery which is not speaking out loudly, but more bringing you inside an idea. I like a lot the feeling of sort of it was called tender cruelty, and that's the definition that was given to the work of Walker Evans by Lincoln Kirstein, curator of MoMA, and I really like it because it's about creating empathy, but without a pietistic attitude. So in a way, that's what I'm searching for and what I like about photography, but also about any other form of art.
I like this term that you have mentioned about visual eco-criticism. I think we need to learn to be increasingly more critical through the images that we create and in the way that we look at images also. Laetitia, what about you? What do you feel about the role of photography today?
So I also don't believe we can change the world, sadly, but it can definitely, first of all, preserve memory, which I think is very important. And it can raise questions, important questions, which will be maybe sometimes very personal or more general. Like, in a personal question can be when I see this refugee crossing the borders with just a backpack. What do we need to survive? How do we welcome the people in need? So it's immediately questioning our relation to the world, to our humanness in general. And then there is the political questions. And I address this in the topic I'm covering. where we can think on the fragility of our democracies in front of a former empire so determinate, but also the precariousness of our solidarity, and therefore the need to question a more broader common European response to it. So I don't think it can change directly the world, but it can at least create a space where of attention, it can hold attention and reflection to maybe slowly then lead to changes.
Tom, I know you've taught for a number of years, but you kind of refused to be in the photography department. What do you feel about photography? Because you've said to me previously that you're not so much interested, or you cannot answer what photography is now, but what it might become.
I felt comfortable to teach young people who grow up with a digital binary world, what photography is. We have like 1,000 whatever different genres of photography, and some of them is art, some of it is documentary, some is very personal. When you think of Roland Barthes, when he published his Camera Lucida in 1950, I think it was, he basically concluded that every single image needs its own philosophy. So the only philosophy of photography we have ever since is Willem Flusser's, philosophy towards the philosophy of photography. And interesting enough, he doesn't have one damned image in his book. So he does it because he speaks about the technical image. So when you think about the smartphone culture today, which I consider as an industrial folklore basically, but it became a kind of a universal, phenomena. And, I think a kid with a sensitive eye, the right timing and a little bit of luck can have enormous impact with this. So, and I think this new generation learns to navigate the world in a very different way. They forget and ignore old conventional tools which have been proved very useful, but they also develop completely new ones. So in times of artificial intelligence, there's this whole discussion in AL, this was like very present this summer, to make, so is it really possible that, artificial intelligence could replace something like human empathy? I mean, that's basically the question. I prefer to speak of artificial intelligence because it's an intelligence outside our body, and we're still far away from integrating in biophysics, technology in our proper body inside. So it's still like another, And so I feel this, we are in a transition from a letter-based culture towards an image-based culture of the future. And naturally, you have a lot of analphabetism, visual analphabetism. It has never been taught at schools. Art, in schools, basically not taught, just like music, but it's a complete new language. Science without images doesn't work anymore. You can't do any cancer diagnosis without images, just for an example. So I think, we have a very limited understanding in the public realm of what photography is. 95% of the cameras produced today are scientific. 5% is consumer cameras. It's a completely different understanding of photography, if you want, not to speak about outer space photography, interstellar photography, etc. And so I think with this technological change we're living in, you have to encourage people to explore this and to make their to make their identity the center of it. You see, when you give like to 20 students a subject like crystal and flame, for example, two very opposites, in their structure. You see, you have a student from India, or let's say from Scandinavia, and he would say, well, warming my soup in winter. And you have a lady from India, and she says, burning the dead. This is complete different, and this is what the strength of diversity. That's where the real potential of photography sits, and really in this very specific realm. And as Susan Sontag said in her famous book on photography, it's the only medium which is, it's so determined by the accident, and not the best education, the best camera equipment, the best training doesn't give you any advantage in front of someone who has the eye to open the shot in the right moment.